All right. What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is July 18th, 2025, about 8:24 p.m. where I'm at right now. And this is episode 8 of our 13th book in our Book to React series, Black Bolshevik, Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist, written by Harry Haywood, a man who lived a full life last century, and I feel like I'm him reincarnated. He died a few years before I was born. Maybe his spirit is in mine. So much of his life resonates with mine, overlaps with mine, parallels with mine, and I find this book endlessly fascinating. Today we're going to be wrapping up chapter 5 of this book, reading the last few sections as he's describing his time in Moscow as a young Black American communist, just joined the party, got sent to go study with the real Soviets, the real Bolsheviks, right after the revolution, and realizing what it's like to be a Black person abroad in a very foreign and distant land. This is a very rare book to find. You can find it on Amazon for the humble price of only $660 US, about, if you translate those pounds into US dollars, which is going down every single day thanks to our administration. And the paperback version will run you a good penny, about $60 so yeah, check that out if you want to get it in your library, but you can find this for free online and print it up yourself at libcom.org. Download it right here. Put it in your library. Read it yourself if you don't like my interpretation of the text. And yeah, shout out to everybody who's been enjoying the content on this channel. We gained a lot of new subscribers over the past week. Man, it's been a busy week on this channel without even much effort. I haven't even uploaded that much, just been going live every day. But we're going to be doing some more movie reviews, so don't think that the movie reviews with Acty and I haven't gone away. I'm going to be releasing some commentary on the Epstein affair right now that's happening, which is sucking up all the air in political discourse in America right now. It's absolutely stupid, but I have to say something about it, right? And yeah, stay tuned for all the other important content we're dropping on this channel. Gotta also drop that video of me traveling in Norway a few weeks ago. So yeah, that's also on the agenda as well. So stay tuned, and shout out to everybody who's gonna be tuning in for this live stream. I have the chat open right here for anybody who's gonna be leaving a comment. We will read it live and reply to it right here. And without further ado, we're going to be continuing in Black Bolshevik on page 163, starting with the section Classmates at Kutva. Because of the language problem, we students from outside the Soviet Union were subdivided into 3 main groups: English, French, and Chinese. English and French were the dominant languages of the many colonial areas represented at the university. Spanish was later added when Latin American students began to arrive. In addition to ourselves, the English-speaking group included East Indians, Koreans, Japanese, and Indonesians. I had many close friends in this latter group. One of the most interesting and brilliant was an Indian student by the name of Sakharov. They all took Russian names because of the severe repression which they faced back home. A former machinist in a Detroit auto plant, Sakharov had been sent to the school by the American Party. Originally from Bombay, Sakharov had gone to sea on a British ship at the age of 12 and had been subjected to very oppressive conditions his whole career at sea. He eventually jumped ship in Baltimore and wound up working in an auto plant in Detroit. Of all the groups of students, he was the closest to us blacks. He knew firsthand the plights of blacks in the United States, and as a dark-skinned Indian, he had experienced much of the same type of racial abuse while there. After he left the school, he returned to India, where he became one of the founders of the Indian Communist Party. Now, that's a trill-ass story. Sakharov needs his own book. I wonder if he has his own story as well. That's a crazy story, man. Back in the day, back in the 20th century was so lit. You know, like, people are migrating and traveling all over the world right now. Like, for example, I'm out here in Hungary, and more people are actually migrating and moving abroad than ever before. But back then, during the time of open borders, when you could just hop on a British colonial ship and then somehow end up in Baltimore and then end up in Russia, like, the shit was crazy back then. You know what I mean? And that also goes to show you, you never know where life will take you. But continuing here. Later, more Indian students were to come, including one 16-year-old, a tall, lanky boy who took the name of Volkov. He had been born in California. His parents were Sikhs who had migrated to the U.S. and worked as agricultural workers in the Imperial Valley of California. They were part of a foreign contingent of the Ghadar Party, a revolutionary nationalist party of Sikhs, which had been organized in 1916. The party would pick out young men to be future leaders. Volkov was chosen and sent to Japan for education and stayed there a year. Then he was sent to study in the Soviet Union, perhaps by the Japanese party. He spoke Japanese and English. That's sick. That's hella sick. Sick. What a sick Sikh. Okay, that was corny. Lame. All right. Among the Indian students was a group of about half of a dozen Sikhs, former professional soldiers, survivors of the Hong Kong massacre of 1926. On the pretext of quelling an imminent mutiny, the British colonel of the regiment stationed in Hong Kong had called the unarmed Sikh soldiers into the regimental square and turned machine guns on them. All regiments in the Indian Army included a British machine gun company as a safeguard against mutiny. Several hundred were killed or wounded. As I understood it, the massacre was engineered to quell the protests over conditions which were being raised by members of the Ghadir party and its supporters. The group who arrived in Moscow were among the few who escaped over the walls. They had fled to Shanghai, where they were taken in charge of M.N. Roy, an Indian and then Comintern representative to China. Roy sent them to Moscow. These students, some of them older, gray-bearded men, had spent their whole lives in the British Indian Army. They represented a special problem for the school, because most of them had very little education of any kind. They were not brought into our class, but were put into a special group under the tutelage of Volkov, Sakharov, and other of the regular Indian students. It was my good fortune to meet many of these Indian students again in 1942, when I was in Bombay as a merchant seaman. Most of them were leading figures in the Indian revolutionary movement. Sakharov had been a defendant in one of the Meerut trials, having been charged with conspiracy against the king. Since his return to India, he had spent 11 years in prison. Nada, another former schoolmate, was president of the Indian Friends of the Soviet Union and were very active among the students and youth. There were several Koreans and Japanese at the school and 2 Indonesians. I remember Derja particularly well. A Dutch-educated Indonesian intellectual. He was an old revolutionary who had spent many years in prison. There was another Indonesian, a young man, whose name I cannot recall, who later emerged as a communist leader and was killed in the Indonesian Revolt of 1946. Kamal Pasha, a party name conferred on him by Sakharov, was a gray-eyed Moroccan from the Riffian tribe of Abdul Krim. I met Kamal Pasha again in Paris during the Spanish Civil War. There were also 2 whites in the group. June Kroll, then the wife of an American communist leader, Carl Reeves, and Max Halef, a young English lad of Russian Jewish parentage. Very interesting, very diverse. What a cool school life. What a cool school life. What a cool undergrad. You never know who you're going to meet in undergrad. You never know who you're going to meet in school. You never know who's going to become a political prisoner or a president. Let it be said. Let's go now to our next section, Blacks in Moscow, page 166. We students were a fairly congenial lot, and in particular, I got to know the other black students quite well. Golden was a handsome, jet-black man, a former Tuskegee student and a dining car waiter. He was not a member of the Communist Party, but was a good friend of Lovett Fort Whiteman, head of the party's Afro-American work. Okay, so what was happening? Because this is like the second time that somebody who is not a member of the party got sent to Moscow. It was just, were they just like, hey, bro, we out in Moscow. Moscow's lit. Like, come out and hang with us. Is that what was happening? Like, what was going on, for real? He was not a member of the party, but he was just hanging out at the school in Moscow. Okay, anyway. Golden told me that his coming to the Soviet Union had been accidental. How do you accidentally end up in Russia, nigga? How the fuck does that happen? He had run into Fort Whiteman, a fellow student at Tuskegee, on the streets of Chicago. Fort Whiteman had just returned from Russia and was dressed in a Russian blouse and boots. As Golden related it, I asked Fort Whiteman what the hell he was wearing. Had he come off the stage and forgotten to change clothes? He informed me that these were Russian clothes and that he had just returned from that country. Golden at first thought it was a put-on, but became interested as Fort Whiteman talked about his experiences. Then, out of the blue, he asked me if I want to go to Russia as a student. At first, I thought he was kidding, but man, I would have done anything to get off these dining cars. I was finally convinced that he was serious. But I'm married, I told him. What about my wife? Why? Bring her along too. Okay, so this was just a party. They were just out there just getting lit, man. They were just like, hey, bro, everybody's going to Russia. It's the Soviet, it's Soviet Burning Man, man. Everybody's rolling. Anyway, he replied, so he took me to his office at the American Negro Labor Congress, an impressive setup with the secretary, and I was convinced. Fort Whiteman gave me money to get passports, and the next thing I knew, a couple of weeks later, we were on the boat with Otto and the others on the way to Russia, and here I am now. Okay, that's just, that's a wild story. That's a crazy story, man. Anyway, he had a keen sense of humor and kidded the rest of us a lot, particularly Otto. His southern accent carried over into Russian, and we teased him about being the only person who spoke Russian with a Mississippi accent. Then there was Bankole, an African who spent most of his time with the Black Americans. He was an Ashanti from the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and his family was part of the African elite. The son of a wealthy barrister, his family had sent him to London University to study journalism. From there, he had gone to Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh. He had been on the road to becoming a perennial student and had planned to continue at McGill University in Montreal, but was recruited to the Young Communist League in Pittsburgh. In the States, he was confronted with a racism more blatant than any he had met before. I gathered that this had struck him sharply and had been largely responsible for his move to the left. Let that story sink in. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of xenophobia right now against the Africans and the Caribbeans and stuff like that, which is not misguided, right? There's a good reason to be wary of some of the Africans and the Caribbeans that come to America, but a lot of them, by the way, you know, are at least liberals, at least. Most of them are not coming and being like blatant MAGA conservatives. Most of them are not working against our interests. Maybe some of them have a lot of anti-black rhetoric in their mind, but, you know, a lot of them at least are liberals, and some even move to the far left. You get what I'm saying? Which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. And Bankole's story is, you know, exemplary of that. So continuing, my brother Otto had become sort of a character in the school. He was popular among the students, who immediately translated his pseudonym, John Jones, into the Russian Ivan Ivanovich. Otto had absolutely no tolerance for red tape and had become a mortal enemy of the apparatchiki, petty bureaucrats in the school. He had built a reputation for making their lives miserable, and when they saw him coming, they would huddle in a corner. Here comes Ivan Ivanovich. Ostorozno, watch out. Bolshi skandal budyet. This guy will make a big scandal. Okay, that's the best Russian I can do. I'm not going to try that again. I'm just going to read the English translation. So, Harold Williams of Chicago was a West Indian and former seaman in the British Merchant Marine. He had adopted the name of Dessalines, one of the three leaders of the Haitian Revolution of the 1790s. Williams had little formal education and some difficulty in grasping theory, but was instinctively a class-conscious guy. Finally, there was Mahoney, whose name in the USSR was Jim Farmer. Farmer was a steel worker from East Liverpool, Ohio, a Communist Party member, and had played a leading role in local struggles in the steel mills. There were only 8 of us blacks in a city of 4,500,000. There were only 8 blacks in a city of 4.5 million people. In addition to the 6 students, there were also 2 black American women who had long residence since before the revolution in Moscow. Okay, how did they end up there? I only knew one of the women, Emma Harris. We first met on the occasion on the death of Jane Golden. Emma was a warm, outgoing, and earthly middle-aged woman, originally from Georgia. It was evident that she had once been quite handsome, or of the type that in the old days we called a tease and brown. Okay, that's that old school slang. What don't you mean that she was that's a badass yellow bone? What do you mean a tease and brown? What is a tease and brown? Boy, that's old school. Anyway, Emma had first come to Moscow as a member of a black song and dance group, a lowly hoofer in the world of cheap vaudeville. Having been deserted by its manager, the group was left stranded in Moscow. While the others had evidently made their way back to the States, Emma had decided to stay. She had liked the country. Here, being black wasn't a liability, but on the contrary, a definite asset. With her drive and ambition to be somebody, Emma parlayed this asset into a profitable position. She married a Russian who installed her, it seems, as a madam of a house of prostitution. It was no ordinary house, she once explained to me. Our clients were the wealthy and nobility. To the former Hoofer, this was status. Okay. Okay. Anything you can think of has happened. Any story that you can think of has happened in this world. Black American lady goes to Russia before the Soviet Revolution, becomes a famous madam in a whorehouse. It happened. It happened. Anything you can think of that happened has happened. Such was Emma's situation in November 1917, when the Russian Bolsheviks and Red Guards moved in from the proletarian suburbs of Moscow to capture the bourgeoisie inner city and the Kremlin. During some mopping up operations, Emma's house was raided by the Cheka, the security police. A bunch of white guardists had holed up there, and the whole group was arrested, including Emma. They were taken to the Lubyanka prison, and some of the more notorious white guardists were summarily executed. Emma remained in a cell for a few days. Finally, she was called up before a Cheka official. He told her that they were looking into her case. Many of the people who had been arrested at her place were counter-revolutionaries and conspirators against the new Soviet state, and some had been shot. Emma disclaimed knowledge of any conspiracy and stated that she was engaged in legitimate business and had nothing to do with the politics of her clients. You know, the only reason we didn't shoot you was because you are a Negro woman, the official said. To her surprise, he added, "You are free to go now. I advise you to try to find some useful work. Keep out of trouble." Okay, Russia-based woke Russia. You know, we didn't want to shoot you because you're a Negro. Like, what is that? Okay, kind of very dark woke in a lot of ways. But hey, when I read that book, Black British, the thing is, a lot of the foreign countries at the time looked down on America for their treatment of black people, and they felt some type of moral superiority to Americans, how they treated black folks whenever they had a chance to. You get what I mean? It might have been off kilter, it might have been a bit weird and stuff like that in the interactions, and maybe the wording might not have been as good as it could have been, but they tried to, have some type of level above the Americans by saying, oh, at least we don't shoot our Negroes, we don't lynch them, we don't hang them, etc. Continuing here. So, when we met Emma, she had become a textile worker. She lived with a young Russian woman, also a textile worker, whom I suspected was a reformed prostitute, if such a thing can be said. In a 2-room apartment in an old working-class district near Krasnaya Voroto, or the Red Gate. See, my Russian is getting better. Soon after the first black students arrived, she sought them out and greeted them like long-lost kinfolk. At least once a month, we students will pool parts of the small stipends we received and give Emma money to shop for and prepare some old home cooking for us. On these occasions, she would regale us with stories from her past life. At times, one could detect a fleeting expression of sadness, of nostalgia for her old days of affluence. One could see that she had never become fully adjusted to the new life under the Soviets. While not openly hostile, it was clear that she was not an ardent partisan of the new regime. Knowing our sentiments, she avoided political discussion and kept her views to herself. Our feelings toward her were warmest when we first arrived, but as we developed more ties with the Russians, we went by to see her less often. But we did continue to visit her periodically. She was a sort of mother figure for us, and we all felt sorry for her. She was getting old and often expressed a desire to return to the States. She was finally able to return home after World War II. I know Netflix will never do it, Apple TV will never do it, Amazon Prime will never do it, but that's a dope-ass show idea, man. 8 black American students at the turn of the century in Moscow, hanging out with Emma and living crazy lives while studying to be future communist leaders and revolutionaries. So much could be done with this premise, man. Somebody write that screenplay. I know it will never be done because it will be like pro-red propaganda, but c'est la vie. Anyway, needless to say, blacks attracted the curiosity of the Muscovites. Children followed us in the streets. If we paused to greet a friend, we found ourselves instantly surrounded by curious crowds, unabashedly staring at us. Once, while strolling down Tverskaya, Otto and I stopped to greet a white American friend and immediately found ourselves surrounded by curious Russians. It was a friendly curiosity which we took in stride. A young Russian woman stepped forward and began to upbraid and lecture the crowd. Why are you staring at these people? They're human beings, the same as us. Do you want them to think that we're savages? Etnakutnya. That is uncultured. The last was an epithet, and in those days a high insult. Eta ne po-Sovietsky. It's not the Soviet way, she scolded them. At that point, someone in the crowd calmly responded, well, citizenness, it's a free country, isn't it? Okay, that's hilarious. That's kind of... Okay. Okay. Now, I've made a big deal on my channel about being followed, stared at, and stuff like that in the store and in the streets and going abroad and stuff like that. I see a difference between, that happening in 2023, 24, 25, and this happening in 1923, 24, 25. Okay, there wasn't the internet back then. People weren't really ignorant. Most people weren't literate. I do see a big difference between then and now when it comes to this sort of interaction. And let's keep it real. 8 black folks in a city of 4.5 million, like almost any major city you go to in the world right now. It could be Shanghai. It could be Pyongyang in North Korea. It could be Japan, like Tokyo, Kyoto, wherever. You're going to find black people, especially the Nigerians. Nigerians are everywhere, so there's no reason to stare anymore at black folks, I feel like in 2024, 25. You can go in the middle of Mongolia and you go find a brother there. You know what I mean? But the first 8 black folks in Moscow, I understand this. I'm not tripping. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. So, we were not offended, but amused. We understood all of this for what it was. There was one occasion when Otto, farmer, Bankole, and I were walking down Tverskaya. Bankole, of course, stood out, attracting more attention than the rest of us with his English cut Savile Row suit, monocle, and cane, a black edition of a British aristocrat. Okay, Bankole, what the fuck are you doing, bro? Jeff says, yo, shout out to Jeff in the chat. What up, Jeff? Let me know what you think about this text, Black Bolshevik, the Autobiography of an Afro-American Communist. This text that we're reading here by Harry Haywood. Let me know what you think of this story. And yeah, continuing here. So Bankole was dressed up like a dandy. He was dressed up like one of those Congolese dandies. So we found ourselves being followed by a group of Russian children who shouted, Jas Bond, Jas Bond. Jas Bond, like James Bond? What? What is Jas Bond? What does that mean? Otto, farmer, and I were amused at this incident and took it in stride. Bankole, however, shaking with rage at the implication, jerked around to confront them. His monocle fell off as he shouted, Niet Jas Bond, Niet Jas Bond, as he spoke. He hit his cane on the ground for emphasis. Evidently, to these kids, a jazz band was not just a group of musicians, but a race or a tribe of people. So a jazz band was a tribe or a race of people to which we must belong. So they were yelling jazz band, jazz band. I thought they were saying something like James Bond, but I don't think the book James Bond was even written back then. Anyway, they obviously thought we were with Leland and Drayton, the musicians I had met in Berlin. They had been a big hit with the Muscovites. We pulled Bankole away. Come on, man, cut it out. They don't mean anything. Okay, all right, I could understand. Bankole's a funny dude. He's a funny dude. That's a crazy story. That's a funny story, though. So in the Soviet Union, remnants of national and racial prejudices from the old society were attacked by education and law. It was a crime to give or receive direct or indirect privileges or to exercise discrimination because of race or nationality, as it is in almost any country on paper. As it is in almost any country on paper, they have laws against racism and discrimination. Any manifestations of racial or national superiority was punishable by law and was regarded as a serious political offense, a social crime. During my entire stay in the Soviet Union, I encountered only one incident of racial hostility. It was on a Moscow streetcar, of course. It's always in public transit. It's always in public transit or some public space. Several of us black students had boarded the car on our way to spend an evening with our friend MacLeod. It was after rush hour and the car was only about half filled with Russian passengers. As usual, we were the objects of friendly curiosity. At one stop, a drunken Russian At one stop, a drunken Russian staggered aboard. Seeing us, he muttered, but loud enough for the whole car to hear, something about black devils in our country. A group of outraged Russian passengers thereupon seized him and ordered the motorman to stop the car. It was a citizen's arrest, the first I had ever witnessed. How dare you, you scum, insult people who are the guests of our country? What then occurred was an impromptu, on-the-spot meeting where they debated what to do with the man. I was to see many of this kind of meeting during my stay in Russia. That's dope. That's dope. Shout out to the Soviet Union. Shout out to the Soviet. Bring it back. Bring it back. Now, listen. I heard a story from another YouTuber who is an old Russian man, and he just makes content all day talking about various topics about what it was like to live in the Soviet Union. I believe he's about, 60, 65 years old. I forgot the name of his channel, but it's out there. Just type in like life in the Soviet Union from like a real Russian. And he told this story about, what anti-black racism, or if any anti-black racism existed during the Soviet Union. And he told this story that he remembers that there was this, black African bus or something like that. And this Russian man who was on the bus kicked this black man in the back and said, "Welcome to Russia," or something like that. And the bus drove away. I remember that story. I have to find the video to validate that. So I'm not going to take, Harry Haywood's word as law that there was no incidences of racism or anti-blackness in Russia. Of course, there's going to be anti-blackness everywhere in the world. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to invalidate his experience if that's what he saw. If he says, I only experienced one incident of anti-blackness and also the Russian people reacted in a very proactive way against it, I'm not going to invalidate it, right? But I'm also not going to invalidate many of the other stories of anti-blackness that came out of Russia during that time and also other parts of the Soviet Union as well. So let's continue here. It was decided to take the culprit to the police station, which the conductor informed them was a few blocks ahead. Upon arrival there, they hustled the drunk out of the car and insisted that we blacks, as the injured parties, come along to make the charges. At first, we demurred, saying that the man was obviously drunk and not responsible for his remarks. No, citizens, said a young man who had done most of the talking, drunk or not, we don't allow this sort of thing in our country. You must come with us to the militia police station and prefer charges against this man. The car stopped in front of the station. The poor drunk was hustled off and all the passengers came along. The defendant had sobered up somewhat by this time and began apologizing before we even had entered the building. We got to the commandant of the station. The drunk swore that he didn't mean what he'd said. I was drunk and angry about something else. I swear to you, citizens, that I have no race prejudice against these black gospoda, gentlemen. Gospoda, gentlemen, okay. We actually felt sorry for the poor fellow, and we accepted his apology. We didn't want to press the matter. No, said the commandant, we'll keep him overnight. Perhaps this will be a lesson to him. And then they beat him mercilessly. Okay. I mean, I wish this happened to white supremacists everywhere in the world. This is a very dope story. I love it. You know what I mean? And I take it on face value. I believe Harry Haywood that this is his account. All right. And yeah, I'm just going to go to the comments real quick. Jeff in the comments says, I just seen you were live, decided to tap in. Do you know the new I Know That You Did Last Summer is out? I might go see it later. Okay, shout out to Jeff. We do movie reviews on this channel. Do you think we should review I Know What You Did Last Summer? I'm going to be real. I'm old enough to remember when the first I Know What You Did Last Summer came out, and I didn't see it because I said that movie looks hella white. Looks hella white. But I might see the new one. Who's in it? Who's in the new I Know What You Did Last Summer? Let me know who's in the film. Tell me. And let me know if you think we should review it. Acty and I. Anyway, I'm going to continue in the text right here. Big Bill Haywood. In addition to the students at Kutva and the 2 black women, there was a sizable American colony in Moscow during my stay there. There were political representatives of the Communist Party USA to the Comintern, the Profintern, the Crescentern, and to the departments, bureaus, and secretaries of these organizations, holding jobs as translators, stenographers, and researchers. Going to the comments, Jeff who says he can't hear anything. I'm choppy. Might be your connection. I checked my connection. I'm totally fine. And everything should be good on my end with the sound. So I think you have to check your internet connection. Mine's doing really well. Anyway, Soviet cultural and publishing organizations also employed U.S. citizens, and in addition to the political groups, there were a number of technical and skilled workers who came as specialists to work for the new Soviet state. I got to know a number of the Americans during my stay, both official reps and others in the colony. Big Bill Haywood was perhaps the most famous of these. He was an organizer and founder of the IWW and a great friend of all blacks in Moscow. At the time I met him, he was in his late 50s and quite ill, suffering from diabetes. Physically, he was only the shell of the man he had once been. He called himself a political refugee from American capitalism. As a sick man, he had fled the U.S. to avoid a 10-year frame-up prison sentence, which he knew he would never have survived. Bill was blind in one eye, over which he wore a black patch. I had imagined the loss of his eye had happened in a fight with company or police thugs, and was rather disappointed to learn that it was the result of a childhood accident. All right. Acty said, this sounds good for me as well. So, Jeff, tell us what you think. Should we review I Know What You Did last summer? And tell me who's in the new film. Let me know who's... It might be all Gen Z actors that I might not even know. You get what I'm saying? Like that Alien Romulus movie where everybody was like going to act in Alien Romulus or be on Love Island. I can't believe I watched Love Island Season 7 this year, and everybody was like younger than me. You know what I mean? And they were like hella young. Like they were like children. I felt almost like R. Kelly watching that joint. Like people will come on, yeah, my name's Nick. I'm 23 years old. I'm like, brother, You know what I mean? And Nick was breaking out the entire time on Love Island. Just skin all types of fucked up. All types of acne and pimples popping over this man's face. Why didn't anybody comment on that? During the entire Love Island fiasco, which was this season, why didn't anybody comment on Nick's horrible skin routine? All right, Jeff says, I'm back. What did you say about the movie? Did you see the original? It came out when I was born. I'm old enough to remember when it was in theaters. Like I remember seeing like the advertisements on TV for I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I wasn't a big horror movie fan when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Because I was hella scared of Chucky. Chucky used to freak me out. And I remember my dad used to like scare me whenever we did watch horror movies, like grab you, like rah, you know what I mean? So I wasn't a big fan of horror movies. It took me later in life to appreciate some good horror films. In fact, my favorite film of all time is a horror film, Martyrs. Shout out to Martyrs, great film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Anyway, new actors, but Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. make a cameo. They look old now, LOL. Shout out to Jennifer Love Hewitt. That's a baddie. That's a baddie with a fatty. Who has been, you know what, I'm not going to say it. But shout out to Jennifer Love Hewitt. Shout out to Jennifer Love Hewitt. Anyway, in the Soviet Union, he had participated in the organization of the Kuzbass colony. This project was to reopen and operate industry in the Kuznetsk Basin in the Urals, closed during the Civil War period. The colony was located about 1,000 miles from Moscow in an area of enormous coal deposits, vital to socialist industrialists. The district, with its mines and deserted chemical plants, had become established by the Soviet government as an autonomous colony. Big Bill had brought a number of American skilled workers, many of whom were old wobblies, to reopen the plants and mines. Big Bill became a member of the CPUSA at its founding convention in 1921, and while in the Soviet Union, he was a member of the CPSU. Bill and his devoted wife, a Russian office worker, lived in the Lux Hotel, a Comintern hostelry. His room had become a center for the gathering of American radicals, especially old wobblies passing through or working in the Soviet Union. Here they would gather on a Saturday night and reminisce about old times and discuss current problems. Often a bunch of us black students were present. Sometimes these sessions would carry on all night until Sunday morning. There were only a few chairs in the room, and Bill would sit in a huge armchair surrounded by people sitting on the floor. For us blacks, listening to Big Bill was like a course on the American labor movement. He was a bitter enemy of racism, which he saw as the mainstay of the capitalist domination over the U.S. working class, a continuous break on labor unity. This attitude was reflected in the preamble of the IWW Constitution, he told us. It read, "No working man or woman shall be excluded from membership in unions because of creed or color." This was borne out in practice. The IWW was the first labor organization in modern times to invade the South and break down racial barriers in that benighted region. He recounted his experiences in the organizing drives among Southern lumber workers in Louisiana and Texas. This resulted in the organization of the Brotherhood of Timber Workers in 1910, an independent union in the lumber camps of Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. At its height, the union had 25,000 members, half of them black. Big Bill described how the IWW broke down discrimination at the first convention of this union. He had come down the national IWW office to speak to the convention. They were all whites, he said, and he inquired why no colored men were present. He was told that the Louisiana state law prohibited meetings of black and white. The Negro brothers were meeting in another hall nearby. Bill recalled that he then told them, "Damn the law. It's the law of the lumber bosses. Its objective is to defeat you and to keep you divided, and you're not going to get anywhere by obeying the dictates of the bosses. You've got to meet together." And the latter is exactly what they did, he told us. Shout out, I didn't know that part of Louisiana history. That's a very cool part of Louisiana history. So it used to be illegal in Louisiana, the state where I'm unfortunately from, for black men and white men to sit together and have meetings, to talk, especially to form unions, right? And so the IWW comes to Louisiana and tells the workers there, listen, fuck the law, fuck separating y'all. Y'all gonna sit in the same room, talk about your same issues as workers and unionize. That's trill. Now that's trill. I'm gonna continue here. I remember that a few days after one of these gatherings, we telephoned to tell him that we were coming over, only to learn from his wife that he had had a stroke and was in the Kremlin hospital. She said that he was getting along okay, but he couldn't see visitors. After several weeks, he returned home. Still weak, he received many of his friends and many of the delegates to the 4th Congress of the Profintern, which was in Moscow at the time. Big Bill had been a leading participant in this organization since its inception. Then suddenly he was back in the hospital where he died May 18th, 1928. The whole American colony turned out for the funeral. There were delegations from the Russian Communist Party, of which he was a member, and from the various international organizations in which he had played a role. The 4th Congress of the RILU adjourned its sessions, and its representatives of trade unions from all over the world attended the funeral. I'm sure for all of us black students, our meeting and friendship with this great man were among the most memorable experiences of our stay in Moscow. A stalwart son of the American working class, Bill's life and battles represented its best traditions. To blacks, he was a man who would not only stand up with you, but if need be, go down with you. He had that John Brown spirit. This was the iron test in the fight against the common enemy, U.S. capitalism. Big Bill obviously understood from his own experience the truth of the Marxian maxim that in the U.S., labor in the white skin can never be free as long as in the black it is branded. Deep, powerful, powerful, powerful stuff right here. So we're going to read this last section right here. It's titled Ina. And really fascinating stuff to, have this, because it's hard to find accounts. Well, not that hard, but there are very few accounts of black people traveling abroad, at this early stage in history, you know what I mean? In the modern world, in the 20th century, right? Haywood said that his parents, were the children of slaves, right? I believe he actually said that his father was enslaved. Like he was born in slavery and got free at around 4 years old or something like that. So he had no memory of it. But still, that's crazy. You know what I mean? To have only a few generations removed from slavery and you're out here in Moscow and meeting all these international people and getting educated. It's so fascinating to see. You know what I mean? Anyway, Ina. I met my second wife, Ekaterina Ina, in December 1926. Okay, here we go. Passport bro time. Passport bro. Harry Haywood, Passport bro Hall. Let's go. We were both at a party at the home of Rose Bennett, a British woman who had married M. Petrovsky Bennett, the chairman of the Anglo-American Commission of the Comintern and formerly CI representative to Great Britain. Ina was one of a group of ballet students whom Rose had invited to meet some of us Kutva students. Ooh, ballerina. She a ballerina. She was a small young woman of 19 or 20, shy and retiring, and sat off removed from the party. After that party, we met several times, and she told me about herself. She was born in Vladikavkaz, so she's from a small town. She's from a small town about to get bust down in northern Caucasus. She from the real Caucasus Mountains. That's a real Caucasian. That boy went to Russia and got a real Caucasian. The daughter of the mayor of the town. Oh, she rich. Daddy's girl got rich. She got money. It was one of those towns that was taken and retaken during the Civil War. One time by the whites, and by the whites he means the reactionaries who were fighting against the Soviets, the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution. Then by the Reds, who were the communists. Okay. On one occasion, when the town fell to the Reds, her father was accused of collaborating with the whites. The Reds came and arrested him, and she never saw him again. Ina was about 11 at the time. She later learned that her father had been executed. Damn. All right. Jeff says Jack Johnson was one generation removed from slavery, and look how successful he was. That's a very good point, Jeff. Very good point. So many interesting stories of our ancestors who were so close to like one of our darkest periods in this world. And they, go on to do amazing things. That's a very good point, Jeff. We should review. Why isn't there a Jack Johnson movie? You know what I mean? Who could play Jack Johnson? You know who should have played Jack Johnson? Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames in his prime would have made a fire Jack Johnson movie. It would have been on the level of Denzel's Hurricane. Think about Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames pimping so hard that they pass a federal law called the Mann Act on him. You feel me? That shit would have been sick. Ving Rhames as Jack Johnson. He's too old for it now. There's no big black burly niggas no more. They don't make them type of niggas no more. You feel me? So that movie could never happen. I don't know who could play Jack Johnson. But Ving Rhames in his prime could have. Anyway. So her uncle was a famous artist in Moscow, and after her father's execution, they went there to live. Ina told me of her trip to Moscow at the height of famine and typhus epidemic. They rode in freight cars several days through the Ukraine and saw people dying along the road. Her uncle took charge of them and got them an apartment on Malaya Bronea. He investigated the case of her father and discovered that a mistake had been made, and her father was posthumously exonerated. As a sort of compensation, she and her mother were regarded as social activists, and Ina entered school to study ballet. She later transferred from the ballet school to study English in preparation for work as a translator. We lived together in the spring of 1927 and got married the following fall after my return from the Crimea. Aww. Oh, see, that's how you do it. That's how you do real passport bro stuff. You don't go to Thailand and just sleep with everything until eventually you hit a ladyboy in shame. No, you go somewhere, you lay up, and you be a player, for real, for real. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. In January 1927, I was stunned by the news of the death of my mother. Oh, shit. One morning, when I was at Ina's house, Otto burst in, overcome by emotion. He could hardly talk, but managed to blurt out, "Mom's dead." He had a letter from our sister, Eppa, with a clipping of Mother's obituary from the Chicago Defender. Under the headline, "Funeral of Mrs. Harriet Hall," was her picture and an article which described her, a domestic worker as a noted clubwoman. She had been a member of the Black Eastern Star and several other lodges and burial societies. The article mentioned that she was survived by her husband, daughter, and 2 sons, the latter in Moscow. I was overcome with grief and guilt at not being home. Deeply shocked, I had always assumed that I would return to see Mother again. Born a slave. See, I was right. It was maybe her father or mother that was born a slave. Born a slave, her world had been confined to the Midwest and Upper South. She had once told me, "Son, I sure would like to see the ocean," and I had glibly promised, "Oh, I'll take you there someday, Mama." I felt that I had been her favorite. I was the responsible one, and yet I hadn't been able to do what I had promised. Worse yet, I wasn't even there when she died. It took me some time to get over the shock. That's a shame. That's really sad. Sad, sad story. All right, so we're going to be wrapping up the live stream here on that sad note, but still, we're going to be starting Chapter 6, Trotsky's Day in Court, in our next live stream tomorrow. And I hope y'all enjoyed this live stream. It's kind of shorter than the other ones. I just wanted to wrap up Chapter 5, but I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, continue joining the live streams. Let me give a shout out to the people who joined into the chat. We have Jeff2131. And we have Acti Hill. She's up in this thing as well. And y'all be easy out there. Catch you on the next live stream.